We got some breaking news. Trump just announced a 100% movie tariff, claiming it as a threat to national security. Hi, it's producer Patrick bringing you the latest in the ever-evolving film and TV industry. Donald Trump just called foreign-made movies a national security threat, and he is slapping them with a 100% tariff. In a Truth Social post, the president said he ordered the Commerce Department to immediately start taxing all movies, quote, in foreign lands. No timeline and no details, but the message was loud. Hollywood's global business model is under attack. Studios like Disney, Paramount, and Warner Brothers have already driven production outside of the United States. However, some economists warn that a 100% tariff could end up hurting American productions, driving up budgets and leading to even more job cuts at home. Meanwhile, China has already escalated their side of the entertainment trade war, slashing the number of American films allowed into its theaters and warning of even more restrictions. Back home, Trump says it's about protecting the U.S. from, quote, messaging and propaganda. However, for Hollywood, the stakes just got much higher. As always, would love to hear your thoughts.
Donald Trump at it again. He wants to kill every industry. That's what I think. Now he's on the movie industry now. So he's like, he doesn't want any movies that is made outside America in America. He's adding tariff on movies that are not made in America. Here we go again. Is this a way to make America great again? Or is he just trying to kill an industry that is growing? Anyway, let's watch these videos and see what people have to say. In the meantime, comment down below and tell me what you think. As a filmmaker myself, I don't know how I'm feeling really, but this one really affects me too.
Uh-oh, here we go again. Trump's threatening to slam more tariffs on Canada, and this time on the film industry.
It's absolutely we've got great people who work in the industry up here, and we deserve to have connection with the people down south.
So listen, let me bring you up to speed, because Trump announced on his platform, Truth Social, ordering new tariffs on all films made outside of the United States. He said he wants a 100% tariff on any and all movies coming into our country that are produced in foreign lands. And unfortunately, that's going to include Canada. He continued by saying Hollywood is being devastated by American filmmakers and studios working overseas. The film industry in Canada is big business. It contributes more than $11 billion to Canada's economy every single year. It's also why the group that represents Canadian actors, called ACTRA, was quick to speak out, saying they're calling on the government of Canada to take a firm stand in defense of our cultural industries as Washington launches yet another attack on Canadian workers. So, of course, you already know, our BG Show team hit the streets to ask Canadians how they're feeling about this announcement.
It's going to affect more smaller artists and smaller studios rather than big names.
His actions are pretty polarizing for sure.
In the meantime, it's not yet clear how these tariffs would be enforced, but BG Squad, you already know I gotta ask you, how do you feel about this? Are you worried about Canada's film industry? And who else here is just tired of Trump? Let me know in the comments below.
Trump is now placing 100% tariffs on movies made in foreign countries, and no one really knows why or what this means, but also, how do you tariff a movie? But as far as Trump, he says that he's doing this because the movie industry in America is dying, and saying that that's because countries are trying to get studios to film in their country with tax incentives that pose a national security threat. Now, it is true that some countries like the UK and Australia, they offer tax incentives to studios if they film there. For instance, the new Avengers movie that'll be filmed in the UK. But Marvel and Disney, they're still American companies based in California, and the majority of movies are still shot in the US. And even with the big blockbuster movies that film abroad, everything besides the filming, it's still done in America largely. And so people saying, it's not clear why Trump might think the Avengers filming in the UK is a national security risk, especially as movies are very much an American industry. In 2023, for example, American movies accounted for 70% of all global film revenue. Something that's been viewed as great for us economically, but also it has unprecedented soft power. Great art is an extension of ourselves or an area, so it naturally contains American themes and it spreads around the world. But it's part of why so many people say that American culture is more or less the default global culture. It's just so dominant that it feels normal. And so regarding the tariff threat, you have industry experts saying that the US, it should offer tax incentives to get filming back. Right? If that's what this is really about, that accomplishes it better than putting tariffs on films not made in the US, because that can open Pandora's box for very little gain. Currently, foreign films just don't pose a threat to American films at the box office, so placing a tariff on them is just kind of asking for a problem. And if we saw countries retaliate, this would destroy Hollywood and American influence, and it could also move the global trade war from goods to services. Which, if there is a big point and a key takeaway here, the US economy is 76% services, so that's something that would be brutal. And this is a thing that's kind of been buried by the nonsense and the chaos, but America, it's the biggest exporter of services in the world, and it has a trade surplus with most of the world when services are accounted for. But for now, follow to stay in the loop.
This is mind-blowing that so many movies are being shot outside the U.S. because it's cost prohibitive to do it here, especially in Hollywood. So how do you go forward in this industry with this?
Well, first of all, I've just started to put this through my thinking cap to try to figure out all the variables, because it makes it incredibly impossible to have a film industry with these kind of locks on your hands. You know, it's not, the money thing is a big issue, like we can talk about that, but it's really the creative thing. I thought about it, I was thinking about which movies could you make. There are American movies like Crazy Rich Asians. It's an American movie. It's produced by Americans. It was financed by Americans. It had American stars. It had, and a couple of English people. It had an American director who did Wicked. You can't shoot that in San Francisco. You know, it's just not possible. So everybody would not have that. They would not have Wicked. They would not have Crazy Rich Asians. And it's really a silly idea. By the way, I know you have questions for me, but the biggest thing for me is, of course, now every country in the world is going to say, okay, we give you 5 movies a year, you know, maybe 5 television shows for Amazon. That's really nice. There's my alarm. But you sell us $23 billion worth of stuff, but we're going to put 100% tariff on that.
Is this really going to have the effect that President Trump thinks it is, which is to bring everyone back to the U.S. to make their movies?
No, it's much too complicated for me to be able to answer you in a couple of seconds how that can't work. But it can't work because the way the business works is international. You know, Mel Gibson, who I believe, I'm not sure, I think he's Mr. MAGA, but you know, he did Passion of the Christ. He didn't shoot that in St. Louis. He did Apocalypto. He didn't shoot that in Phoenix either. So I don't know exactly where this begins and ends, except it ends the film business as we understand it now. It's not tenable. It's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. And by the way, it's perfect sense that Trump would have come up with this idea. Who advised him to do this is, I don't know, they're morons.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm freaking tired. Man, the last 24 hours have been ridiculous. Well, so a threat of tariffs came, and there were a few people that were cheering it on. This is great news. What are you talking about? As a producer, one thing of my job is cause and effect, meaning I have to look at all the scenarios and how they play out. Even on Amazing Race, every night before the race actually happens, before an episode gets filmed, all the producers of that episode get together and we play what if. We play this hypothetical game of worst case scenarios, where what if a team gets on a train and goes to another country? What if they lose their passport? And that way, as producers, you are planned to expect the unexpected. One, we were not given any information beyond we're implementing this tariff. And we didn't know if that meant American films filming abroad, it meant foreign films coming into the US. And on the surface, yes, it's like bringing back jobs to the United States on a very black and white scale. Unfortunately, the entertainment industry is a resounding gray. It's so complex and intricate. But what's so important to remember that it's not lost is these are livelihoods. These are people's lives. Okay, this is not a monopoly game. Production workers have been out of work for 2 years, and this is not making the situation any better. The TV and film industry is on life support. And if you have a body in the hospital that is dying, you don't just go up to it and say, well, we'll see if the defibrillator will shock it back to life. You don't do that. You could possibly kill the patient. If you were a doctor, you examine it. You thoroughly evaluate it, and you weigh the pros and cons. We want to bring production back to the US. Oh my God, we do. And if there is any silver lining to any of this, it's the fact that now the discussion is national to actually have real talks about this failing industry, because it has gone under the radar for years. If we want to bring production back to the US, we need to have serious conversations. We need to have our legislators involved. We need Congress involved, because here's really what's on the line. We're starting to see some life in our industry. We're seeing a massive indie movement happening. But if the government gets this wrong, it's game over for all of us. Just thought I'd share.
If you're in the film talk, movie talk space and you voted for this person and you continue to support them to this day, you do not care about the arts, you do not care about film, you are absolutely full of shit. Latest news from 418 today, quote, the movie industry in America is dying a very fast death. Other countries are offering all sorts of incentives to draw our filmmakers and studios away from the US. Hollywood and many other areas within the US are being devastated. This is a concerted effort by other nations and therefore a national security threat. It is, in addition to everything else, messaging and propaganda. That means nothing, but moving on. Therefore, I am authorizing the Department of Commerce and the United States Trade Representative to immediately begin the process of instituting a 100% tariff on any and all movies coming into our country that were produced in foreign lands. We want movies made in America again. So that right there is actually an attack on the movie industry, desperately disguised as a way to help the movie industry in Hollywood. Movies forever have been made with international collaboration. It is interesting to go around the world and acquire talent from different places. It is interesting to make movies where you can have different backgrounds. You can go other places and shoot in beautiful situations. It gives you flexibility to tell more interesting and diverse stories while shooting on location. But a franchise like Mission Impossible, something that conservatives and liberals probably both can come together to enjoy. What would that franchise be without that international collaboration and hopping around the world to tell those stories? Because this man speaks like a child and just kind of spouts off and has no planning or forethought, we don't know exactly what this means. Does this mean movies that are solely produced overseas and then trying to come into the United States, or does it mean US-backed productions that have bits and pieces of stuff filmed overseas as well? Going with that second bit there, this would essentially destroy the movie industry, right? If this was going to double the cost of a movie that was willing to go overseas, and then you're also going to get hit with reciprocal tariffs, right? So you're not going to get the international market and you're going to hurt the box office there. It will literally become impossible, again, to make interesting stuff. The problem is this will put more pressure on unions in the United States because studios will be pushing even harder if they have to make everything here, and they're going to want to make stuff as cheap as humanly possible. Trump's actions around purposely tanking the economy have already hurt the film industry in our second biggest market, which is China. Chinese people, alongside the people of the United States, have enjoyed American cinema for a long time, and they have boosted the profits of Hollywood. So many American movie franchises like Avatar, The Fast and the Furious, again, stuff that everyone enjoys, right, will be hurt by this because international markets love that. There will be reciprocal action from other countries around the world. It will hurt independent film, art house films, prestige films, stuff that relies on going other places to make stuff for slightly cheaper. Isolationist attitude towards international film is also just bad for American culture. Why would you not want to experience stuff from other places? We'll hopefully run into problems around the Constitution and the World Trade Organization. Because see, vaguely labeling international films as messaging and propaganda, whatever the fuck that means, is not going to fly when it comes to free speech. Can anyone name one international film they've watched recently that is any type of anti-American messaging or anything dangerous? There's only one thing I've watched recently that I think Donald Trump might find dangerous, and it has absolutely nothing to do with America. Exactly are these subversive ideas that this administration is allegedly so concerned with? Continue to dumpster American credibility, cultural diplomacy, and our soft power, which is already in the fucking toilet. All that being said, if you are my follower, if you are my mutual, if you still try to support this, please go to my page, hit unfollow, and kindly fuck off.
Trump's tariff on foreign-made films is the dumbest idea I have ever heard. Film is one of the few industries that we actually export, that we make in the United States. That's a huge export all over the world. Why are we trying to cripple an industry that has already been through so much in the past few years? Let's just give him the benefit of the doubt and assume that he was talking about American companies making films in foreign countries that are then going to be licensed to screen in the US. Which for now, nobody knows what it means. The US is not the biggest market for films. Studios make most of their money on worldwide sales, territories outside the US. So there is nothing stopping Warner Brothers from opening a company in Hungary, filming an English language film there, and then selling it everywhere except the United States, never paying a single cent of a tariff, and none of that income coming into the United States except for the workers that worked on that film. And then they'd probably just put it on Amazon and we'd have to pay $30 for a rental to see it. The reason companies go to foreign countries to film is because they give a 35 to 40% tax credit. Let's say you made your film for $10 million, you get close to $4 million back as a refund. So your film was much less expensive to make. And that means you can make a greater profit on it, which is a huge incentive to make a film there. Los Angeles right now is trying to increase its film tax credit to 35 to 40%, which would make it extremely competitive in the world market for filming locations, which will hopefully fix some of these companies going outside of LA and outside of the United States to film. That's the way to do it, not whatever this is. I'm actually developing a film right now, and I just got an email this morning from my sales agent saying, hey, no one knows what this is, and no one's gonna buy or sell anything until they do. So I don't know what's gonna happen to my project, which was gonna shoot in the US, by the way.
I think a lot of you guys are about to find out exactly how replaceable the United States is, because arguably the only American export that cannot actually be replaced by another country, technically, is American culture via American media, and that's already been happening. As someone who works in the film industry, or worked, because at this rate, I don't know that I ever will again, the film industry moving overseas is a harbinger for what is to come, and not necessarily in the sense of like, oh, they're moving the jobs overseas. No. This is a lot bigger than that. So despite what you may think, and despite the metrics saying that it's crude oil, I would argue that media and entertainment is actually America's biggest export. The global media and entertainment industry is worth around $2.8 trillion. This doesn't just include movies, it's also TV, broadcasting, radio, books, video games, all sorts of stuff. But the US, while it's not a leader in all of these sectors, it is definitely a leader in film and TV and advertising. And in total, the US's share of the media and entertainment industry is around $649 billion. The thing is, the media and entertainment industry isn't just good for the US because it brings in a lot of money, it's also doing a lot of the heavy lifting for how the US is able to maintain its power globally. Because if you provide the entertainment for people, then you control the message. It helps to export and normalize this whole narrative about the American dream, the American way of life, the American culture, and it helps maintain the illusion of America. And as a result, people want more of it, right? So American media helps propagate this idea of America, which makes America quite fascinating. It's essentially like this self-fulfilling cycle. And belief in the US ultimately sustains everything that it has going on for itself. Because again, the US doesn't create anything that another country can't create. Even the big, like, innovative ideas, right? 2/3 of Silicon Valley is foreign. As you may know, the film industry has had a rough few years, but now in the film industry, a lot of jobs are going overseas. US production was down 40% in the second quarter of 2024 compared to its 2022 peak, but it was only down 20% in the rest of the world. Netflix and Amazon account for 53% of original streaming content production, and around 70% of those shows and movies are non-US productions. They've also been reducing English content acquisitions while increasing non-English content acquisitions. In part, yes, it's because labor and costs are higher in the US than elsewhere, and soon about to be much higher. But the bigger issue is that they're realizing that media doesn't have to be American anymore. It's only going to get worse now that no one likes America, and we've shattered the whole American dream illusion. Turns out, just about everyone else in the world is pretty good at ingesting media that was not created in their country or culture, because they've always done it, while Americans are pretty bad at it. And this is in large part a result of the US exporting so much media. I grew up in Spain, and most of the media we consumed was American media. As a result, I and many other people in Spain are very, very comfortable watching things that are dubbed and subtitled. Most countries, you dub or subtitle something. In the US, you make a US version remake. The one benefit the US always had with Hollywood and entertainment and whatnot is that American culture thing. But now with shows like Casa de Papel or Money Heist and Squid Game, companies like Netflix are figuring out that they can make very, very successful shows that are not American media, and the rest of the world will eat it up. This is not just about jobs lost. The real issue is that the US's power entirely comes from its ability to create a need for itself. Just like with the military, right? They whine about over-reliance on the US military. That's by design. We made it so that other countries would rely on us for something because the reliance is our power. Same with the dollar standard. It is artificial need and exported desire. And that makes everything else possible. It's why people invest in America. It's why smart and talented people move to America. It's why people buy American products. The only irreplaceable part of America is the illusion that we have shattered.
One thing I find interesting about, these talks of Trump tariffs in the film industry is people bring up, maybe finally Canada, would have to build its own industry and build a sustainable industry. And I have so many thoughts about this. One of which is like the complete decimation of our current industry in favor of some other industry is not great. So I'm not here suggesting in any way, shape, or form that I want to see that happen. We obviously have a massive service production industry and a creative industry that works on American projects and projects from other parts of the world, whether that's crews on films, whether that's post-production. I mean, most movies, if you stick around for the credits, which hopefully you do, to see all the people who worked on the film, and then maybe you're going to get some, special end credit scene that reveals something, depending on the movie that you're going to see. But basically, if you look at the logos at the end of a credit reel, often you'll see on a big, franchise movie, a Quebec logo, a BC logo, an Ontario logo, etc. And that's because we do so much visual effects work here, we do so much post work here in Canada, and we're great at it, and people get tax credits for it, there are incentives to use it, so we get a lot of that part of the industry coming here. And obviously we have beautiful locations and crews who know what they're doing, so people come here and shoot. What I've been talking about for ever is the fact that we really do gear our entire industry, all of the models that we have for tax credit organization, for everything really, we gear it toward that side of the industry, what I will call the service production side. But I don't want to suggest when I say that it's not creative, because it absolutely is. It's just easier to call it that, service production, as opposed to, let's say, the domestic side of filmmaking, where we are making our own movies, we are investing, we are creating an ecosystem that sees the IP ownership, the back end, the financing happening in Canada from beginning to end, in a meaningful way. Not probably there are other partners and co-productions and such, but in a meaningful way, Canadians are involved in every part of that process, and not just hired by a foreign company who comes here to shoot something or does their post here. And people have been saying like, well, like maybe now this will force us to invest in our domestic production side, in our filmmaking ecosystem in Canada. And listen, I am generally speaking a person with hope, a person with optimism, a person who really, tries to have an outlook that makes invention possible and progress possible. But it is really hard to imagine that when, from my current vantage point, I see how the systems we work with absolutely are not built in any way, shape, or form for that. I mean this on every level. I mean it on a bureaucratic level. Certainly I mean it on a financing level. Like, we don't have an ecosystem that includes robust funding or diverse funding models. When we do use diverse funding models or alternative funding models, the system that is used to the same old way it's done, the status quo, freaks out and doesn't know what to do with that, making innovation nearly impossible, making sustainability nearly impossible. A lot of people see what we've built at Highball TV and they look at it from the outside and they see all the innovation and they see all of the sweat equity and all of the artistry first and the how prolific we've been. And I'm very proud of all of that. And that is, yes, we do really focus on that. And I'm really happy when people notice it and comment. What you don't see and what we don't always share, partly because sometimes we can't share it because it's complicated and not a thing that I can talk about easily just in a soundbite like this. also sometimes it's just exhausting, so I don't want to share it because I want to focus on the positive things in life. But what you don't see is just the constant fight. The constant fight. And this is not a woe is me video. We took on these challenges, these risks, these projects because we believed in them, because we wanted to. We have participated in some incredibly bold experiments, some of which have really worked out and some of which have really not, much to the detriment of a lot of parts of our lives and livelihood. But that's life, that's art, that's business, that's why we're here to try things, right? And Matt and I, my partner Matt and I, both have a stomach for a certain amount of risk. He usually more than me, but that we took all of that on, and we took that on, we put everything on the line. So what you don't see is the risk is sizable for us, to ourselves and our livelihood and our property and our everything, and I don't think that people understand that is not a thing that is really valued, understood, encouraged, respected in Canada. It just isn't. It's just seen as why would you do that? Why would you do that? Why don't you just do it the way everybody else does it? And that's just easier for me. It's just easier for me if you make my life easy and you just do it the way everybody else does. Come on. Aren't you happy with just that? Isn't this it already exists this way? Why would you do it differently? Never taking into account that the way that it currently is very, very, very flawed. And to be clear, the way that the very capitalist-driven, short-term, quarter-by-quarter profit-getting tech bro vibes in the States and with streamers and all of that, that's also very incredibly flawed and broken and not sustainable and coming apart. And we see it happening in real time. We see it happening. So neither of these systems in and of themselves are really all that functional. And there's always this debate in Canada around how we support the art we make here. And I think it's complicated. There are certainly personal things we can do as individuals to support Canadians who are making film here in Canada. But if we're talking about, a systemic change, that is going to take risk, and it's going to take a massive change. It means that we're going to have to innovate on the incentive side, the tax credit side, on the financing side. We need a far more robust and varied ecosystem of financing that includes private financing. We need incentives and an easier way for Canadian producers to navigate all of these systems, because they are built to favor foreign productions coming here and taking advantage of incentives. I don't care what anybody tells me. All evidence points to that in my experience. And that's an awful thing and needs to be addressed, because they should be helping Canadian producers more than they do, and they're not by a long shot. We have to engage more in our communities with the things that are being made in our communities. And the only way we're going to do that is less reliance on American programming. If I see one more ad about the streaming service I'm watching that's proudly Canadian and the whole ad is American shows, even if they shoot in Canada, that's not proudly Canadian. I don't care that the company is owned here if you're just putting all your money into American projects. And we have to stop gearing all of our labor agreements and everything to satisfy and encourage that work coming here and using our talent here, and not helping to build filmmakers here in Canada. It's a massive undertaking. It's going to take a whole lot of belief in ourselves and investment in ourselves. We have to be willing to risk.
As per Trump he's saying he's not trying to hurt the industry, but he's trying to help the industry. Do you think this is the right measure, or this is the right way to go about it? I don't know. I don't think so. There's some disadvantages and advantages for sure. Right now, I feel he'll make the Hollywood and the film industry in America a bit expensive. I know some movies are being shot or filmed outside Hollywood, and I don't know, that will make it a bit expensive. What do you think? Comment down below. Let me hear what you have to say about the tariffs on films, especially the films that are made outside America. Is this really making America great again? I have my doubts. What are yours?